federal laws do not trump constitutionally protected rights, period. They cannot, because it would unravel the whole fabric upon which the government has been brought to exist.
Currently, the EPA is aggressively attacking the diesel aftermarket.
The EPA shows up my business, like, the Gestapo, the mafias come in and say, hey, now they want this.
By use of threats, duress, intimidation, fraud, and extortion, violating the rights, shutting down businesses, and stealing private wealth from the hardworking backbone of America.
I want the government to stay out of my damn business.
Well, the last time I checked, we lived in a free country, and I feel like we're living in communist China.
Until now, no one has offered a way to stop these criminal government employees. Two brothers. One, a successful business owner with a master's degree in engineering. The other, a civil rights attorney. Both devoted to upholding the Constitution, stopping the illegal and relentless government intrusion on our rights, and making government officials pay for their criminal acts. Welcome to episode 2 of Diesel versus EPA Terrorism. The Constitution is the law of the land. We'll start out this episode by reading a Facebook comment by Dale Armstrong. Dale said, I bought a new F350 dually extended cab, long wheelbase in 2011. It ran great, tons of power, and all around 18 to 20 miles per gallon until Ford had an emission recall. When I got it back from the dealer recall, the power was cut way back. Very poor throttle response. It had throttle lag so bad, I was afraid to cross a 4-lane highway or pull out into traffic. The miles per gallon were cut from 20 to a jaw-dropping 9 miles per gallon. After taking it back to the dealer the third time, they got it back up to 11 to 12 miles per gallon. A little better throttle response and a little better torque and horsepower. Then at 67,000 miles, the truck shut down because of the DEF system. The dealer wanted $3,500 to remove and clean and restore the system. If it could not be cleaned, they wanted $5,500 to replace the system. Instead, for $4,800, I took it to a diesel repair shop, and they had the DEF system totally deleted and installed the programmer. Now the truck has more power and torque, better throttle response, and is up to 18 miles per gallon. It doesn't roll coal unless I turn the programmer all the way up and really get on it. Thanks, Dale. We do not give legal advice. Under the protection of the First Amendment, we are merely exercising our right to speak and discuss things that we feel are important to all free men and women.
Yeah, so the emissions regulations almost always do the exact same things. They cause your truck to burn more fuel, cause you to get less mileage, cause you to have to repair your truck perpetually with garbage repairs that cost a ton of money, and they don't put less into the atmosphere. They think they do, but how when your mileage is cut in half, you're burning twice the fuel, how is that putting less into the atmosphere?
The whole thing is asinine.
The fact is, they're taking great trucks and absolutely destroying them with these emissions regulations because the people making the so-called laws don't have a clue what they're doing. And then they're putting these regulatory agencies in place that are completely unconstitutional and trying to enforce this garbage when you purchase a truck and it becomes your personal property.
The Clean Air Act, all the EPA regulations that force trucks to burn more fuel and spend a ton more money just to own and drive your private property, your truck. For one, this is destruction of your property. It's trespassing on your rights. And two, these federal statutes, the legislation that has been passed, the EPA regulations are not lawful when they violate your rights.
And we're going to show you the actual statements that prove what we're saying is true. And for all you government trolls out there that keep getting on our Facebook and commenting and saying, oh, these are the laws, this is how the world works now. I want you to prove how the Clean Air Act doesn't violate the Constitution. I want you to prove how it doesn't violate our rights. And I want you to show me why the agents that are enforcing this stuff shouldn't be put in jail or at least forced to pay back all the damage they've done to these individuals. They've gone in and robbed their businesses, their property, their livelihood, removed years of life by the stress they've caused these people. I want you to prove to me why they have the right to do this. I guarantee you can't.
The interesting thing about this whole scenario is the way it's set up. Federal laws do not trump constitutionally protected rights, period. They cannot, because it would unravel the whole fabric upon which the government has been brought to exist.
Yeah, let's talk about the hierarchy. Tell us that hierarchy, how that works.
Well, we the people declared our independence. We declared our independence. We fought for our freedom, and we won it to ensure that those rights that were endowed by our Creator were ours. So
it made us a free people when this happened.
And then we became the sovereign. We didn't have a king, a ruler, or anybody else over us. We created, at that point, we the people were on top. We created the Constitution. The Constitution created the government and legal systems such as the executive, legislative, and judicial branches. The government creates the statutes, legislation, and all that stuff. There's no way that what they're creating can be regulating we the people that are on top of the food chain. We created the Constitution, that created the government, that created the statutes. Unless you voluntarily subject yourself to those statutes, your rights cannot be violated. The Constitution was created to create bounds around the government. It did not create bounds around us. It bound the government. We are above the government because the government only exists by our authority. We own the country. The country doesn't own us. We are the sovereign. We are the free. The government was created by we the people. Let that sink in for a second. The reason that sounds right is because it is the truth. We are a common law country. We are based on common law. That means we can do anything we want to as long as we don't infringe upon the rights of someone else, someone's right for life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, as long as we don't injure somebody else.
Explain, and that doesn't mean you just physically injure them. It means you damage their property or cause them money or cause them harm that in somehow that's considered injuring another person under the law.
Correct. And unless you've done something like that, you're free to even make a fool of yourself if you want to.
Well, and the hierarchy that you're talking about, if the Constitution means nothing, then that means the government below it means nothing. Then that means the legislatures and the president and the Congress and all that below them mean nothing. So therefore, the Constitution has to be adhered to, or
Yes.
our society falls apart. Here's the other thing about it. When you said the Constitution limits the government, it really is we the people. If you read the Constitution, it says we the people. They're saying I myself, or we the people, are talking to the government. It's written to the government to limit the horrible things that they had seen King George and the other kings do to them. The whole point of the Constitution was to put limitations and reins on the government so that they could never get out of control and do exactly what we're seeing them do right now. And so we're going to show you how the regulations that they're implementing here are absolutely illegal and they violate the Constitution. And once they do that, they become null and void. They become worthless.
Federal laws do not trump constitutionally protected rights, period. They cannot, because the Constitution created the government. You can't say that the regulations, the statutes, the laws that the government's creating is good law, but the Constitution, that means nothing. You can't say that. It doesn't make sense.
Hey, just want to quickly send a shout out to another one of our sponsors, the freedom-loving guys over at Diesel Power Source. They now have the amazing new Turbinator VGT Turbo, the fastest spooling and cleanest performance turbo on the market. If you need cooler EGTs and quicker spool up, check out dieselpowersource.com. That's dieselpowersource.com.
And if anyone doesn't believe what we're saying here, all you have to do is you look to the Supremacy Clause in the Constitution. The Supremacy Clause, which is backed up by Supreme Court rulings, establishes that the Constitution, federal laws made pursuant to the Constitution, and treaties made under the Constitution's authority constitute the supreme law of the land. Thus, they can say that the Clean Air Act and the EPA's regulations and that, they can say those are the law, but they are only the law if they don't conflict with the Constitution.
If they do not remove any one of the guaranteed rights in the Constitution, correct?
Well, yes, because it would conflict with the Constitution if it violated any of your constitutionally protected rights. And those are all spelled out in the Bill of Rights. Federal laws that are made by legislators, governments, officials, they cannot supersede the Constitution. Doing so would be stepping outside the limits and boundaries set up by the Constitution.
Unless the people want to volunteer to be under them.
Yeah, unless you subject yourself to them, which a lot of people are doing right now. And for anyone else that says, well, the Supremacy Clause, blah, blah, they don't believe that. All right, well, how about Supreme Court rulings? Marbury versus Madison, a Supreme Court case held back in 1803, where it says that Congress cannot pass laws that are contrary to the Constitution.
Well, and that has never been repealed. Has never been repealed or overruled.
No, it's one of the most important cases. And then you also have Miranda versus Arizona. You ever heard of the Miranda rights? That was actually a case. And this is what was said in that. And I quote, where rights secured by the Constitution are involved, there can be no rulemaking or legislation which would abrogate them.
Abrogate means to repeal or do away with a law, right, or formal agreement.
It's not just we're saying this. The Constitution says it, and Supreme Court cases after Supreme Court case support what we're saying.
Go back to that Miranda versus Arizona, because on every TV show, anytime anyone's arrested, they make this big deal of read them their rights.
Miranda rights, yeah.
That comes from this case that clearly is somewhat being followed, because they know if they don't follow that, the evidence they use against you in court can't be used if they violate that. There's a lot in that case of Miranda versus Arizona, a lot more than just reading someone their rights and telling them they have the right to remain silent.
Yeah, it's all about rights altogether. But our country is based on common law. Under the common law, you are free to do anything you want to, as long as you don't infringe on the rights of another, or as long as you don't harm another person. So you're free to do anything you want as long as you don't harm another person. Now think, is that how these government statutes and regulations, the Clean Air Act, is set up?
To make it really clear, to put this to the EPA and what they're doing, the Constitution has the due process, all the things in the Constitution that require them to have certain due process when they come in to put you in a situation where you're going to go to trial or something. They have to have warrants. They have to have a witness against you, a damaged party, all this stuff they have to have. They have to let you know what the cause and action is against you. And when an EPA agent walks into your office and essentially holds a gun to your head, whether it's by fear or an actual gun, when they walk in there and don't have a warrant, which they never will have a valid warrant.
Yeah, you're right. They never get a warrant because they can't get a warrant. No one's been harmed. They don't have jurisdiction.
When they walk in there and do this, they are in complete violation of the Constitution.
Miranda versus Arizona says where rights secured by the Constitution are involved, there can be no rulemaking or legislation which would abrogate them. What we're trying to help you understand here is that no federal legislation, law, regulation can supersede the Constitution. And you know what? Every government employee, every agent, every EPA agent, every official, they are required to take an oath of office. And you know what that oath of office says?
Read it.
Here's what the oath of office says.
I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. They have to bear true faith and allegiance to that Constitution. That I take this obligation freely and without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. So they're saying they do not plan on evading this oath which they've sworn to.
Well, they agree to uphold the law of the Constitution because they're going to be enforcing the law. Doesn't that make sense? If you're going to enforce a law, you have to swear to uphold that same law and to know the law. And remember, ignorance to the law is no excuse for breaking the law.
Yeah.
And this applies to them. They always use this against us. They have voluntarily signed this contract oath.
Anytime they violate their oath of office, it's fraud because they said they would do something. They're not. They didn't even plan to do it, is what looks like the way the government's being ran. But enforcing an unconstitutional act is a violation of a government employee's office, making him guilty of colorable law, making him susceptible under the Section 1983 for him to be personally liable, both civilly and criminally. So under U.S. Code Title 42, Section 1983, clearly establishes the right for us to sue anyone that violates our constitutional rights. The Constitution guarantees that anyone that would unlawfully jeopardize our property loses property to us. And that's what justice is all about. Under Section 1983, we can hold these government EPA agents, these criminals, we can hold them civilly and criminally liable. And that goes all the way up, not just the agent.
Civilly meaning we can sue them and they can pay us if they violated our rights. Criminally means they can actually serve jail time or be fined or be removed from their place of office. And we have mechanisms to do this. We actually are going to show you in further podcasts how we are doing this right now.
The purpose of these podcasts is to give you an educational basis to know your rights and know how to invoke your rights to protect you against any government intrusion. Today, we've talked about how federal and state and local statutes and legislations do not supersede, do not trump the Constitution. We are just going to keep building upon this and building a base for you so that you have complete understanding of how to invoke your rights and go after these government agents. They're acting as terrorists. They're violating their oath of office. They're violating the law. They're stepping outside the bounds of the Constitution. We're going to teach you how to go after them personally and how to protect your business, your property, how to protect everything you own, because there's nothing more important than our rights. And next time in our podcast, we're going to talk about jurisdiction and how these government agencies like the EPA do not even have jurisdiction over you. We are granting them the ability to take away our property, our freedoms, our rights, when really they don't even have jurisdiction. We're going to show you why they don't and how you stop them from doing it. We're actually going to go through a case and interview a man who had the EPA terrorists come in to his business, and he ended up having to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we're going to break apart everything that happened in there, every way they committed fraud and broke the Constitution, every way they misled him. And we're going to talk about what he did, what he should have done, what he could have done, and what he still may be able to do to go against the government and actually invoke his rights and protect his property.
Well, and for you government agents, or so you know this about government agents, there is no statute of limitations when your rights are violated. Meaning, if it's happened 100 years ago that they violated your rights and you can prove it, you can go back after them.
Yes, because
Why?
statutes do not dictate your rights. A statute of limitation was created by statute. Your rights were created and given to you by God.
One final comment I would like to make. This is a quote by Thomas Jefferson. He said, "Whenever people are well informed, they can be trusted with their government. We cannot be trusted to be over a government, which we are, if we're not informed. If we allow these things to happen and don't educate ourselves on them, we're going to become slaves, and we already have." Now, we're not giving legal advice here. This is for entertainment and education purposes only. And the last thing we're going to say is, if a government agent walks into your business or your home, treat it the same. You do not tell them anything. You record it with your phone and you demand to see a warrant. If they don't have it, kick them out.
They're not going to have a warrant. They'll threaten you and they'll say certain things like, well, if we have to go get a warrant, it's going to be worse for you. That is a bunch of BS. If they could have gotten a warrant, they would have in the first place before they made the trip out to your place. Remember that.
If your rights have been violated or you've been visited by the EPA or other government official, please tell us about it. We can be contacted at freedombrospod@gmail.com. freedombrospod@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. We will be back real soon with another episode of Diesel versus EPA. The information obtained in this podcast is not, nor is it intended to be legal advice pursuant to the First Amendment of the Constitution. We have merely shared information, ideas, and opinions free of government restrictions.
Until next time, remember, we the people are more powerful and free than we've been led to believe. This has been a Freedom Brothers podcast, made possible by the First Amendment.
The Freedom Brothers love Silvatize hand sanitizer with the power of silver. Check out Silvatize hand sanitizer. Unlike alcohol-based hand sanitizers, Silvatize continues to kill microbes up to 3 hours after it has been applied. Check it out on Amazon and silvatize.com. silvatize.com. silvatize.com.